Previously on a Scout Method podcast.
Trying to engage my core a little bit more, holding on to stuff, but paying attention to how I engage my core, things like that. It's just really focusing and paying attention on your body. And that is what I was telling myself. Pay attention to your body. What does your body need? And I started figuring out what it needed.
Right.
But it needed to be more consistent. I would get tired. I would get frustrated. And I wanted to quit. It was hurting,
All while
things like
still
that.
dealing with autoimmune disease.
Yes, all of that. Like my body, I felt like my body literally shutting down on me, like just giving out on me. But I was like, no.
No.
No. You cannot do that right now.
What's up, y'all? Listen, it was a good time this last episode or last two episodes where we had our first guest of the Scout Method podcast on deck, Coach Erica, my boo. It was a good time, very good conversation. And it was one of those things where, hey, look, already as we, sit here right now, like there are a lot of people who kind of got back to us, offline and all that fun stuff and was just like, hey, you should do it again. So if you want me to bring Coach Erica back on board, you got to let me know. Let me know because there are plenty more stories to discuss and talk about and not lying, a la how we initially met. I told the truth the entire time, and I still maintain my innocence in the whole story. Anyway, welcome to episode 23. Episode 23, Built to Last. And what we want to talk about in this episode is the idea of health, performance, and longevity, right? And this started off kind of strange at first, right? So this was supposed to be a completely different episode. I had penned out a whole different thing, and it just ended up being something different. So without further ado, what's going on, everybody? Hope you're doing well out there. I'm Coach Evan. This is Say Cheese and Lift Studio, and you're listening to the Scout Method podcast, your one-stop shop for not only just physical fitness, but mental fitness, emotional fitness, and spiritual fitness. Let's get to this episode. All right. So what this episode started out as initially was it was just going to be a simple talk on the benefits of lean muscle and the benefits of gaining lean muscle tissue, right? And where that came from was I've been having conversations. I always have conversations. Not that it was like a debate or anything, sort of, right? Because, but some of them were. But I was having conversations with a lot of people about this, about the explosion of, various injectables, right? And again, I haven't taken a side either way, really. I'm just still gathering information for a lot of different things because I see some benefits and I see some drawbacks. As with anything, there are benefits and drawbacks, right? But anyway, like I was having these conversations, we were talking about Ozempic in particular and Ozempic, Mounjaro, the Wegovy's, like all the brand big commercialized injectables, right? The GLP-1s, essentially. And the conversation about, just wanting to lose weight and seeing a number change on a scale without ever really, figuring out or determining whether it was, you're losing fat or you're losing lean muscle tissue. And in many cases, you're just losing lean muscle tissue, but you were losing weight and people would still be happy. So we were talking about that general idea. And it's funny because like that conversation has come up over the entirety of my training career. So I find it not annoying, but I find it interesting that we keep going back to the same conversation, and it just seems like with the explosion of the injectables here, that this conversation seems to have some form of staying power now. And it's interesting because so at the end of the day, I always will take the stance that, if you're going to lose weight, you really want to you want to target fat loss, right? Inevitably, though, if you're going to lose a large amount of fat, you're going to lose a little bit of muscle that comes with it. But you want to prevent how much muscle loss there is concerning that. That's where I stand. That's where I probably always will stand, unless some other studies come up and show something that says that it's a benefit to lose muscle mass while losing fat. I don't think that's happening. So that's where I stand concerning that. And it's always a constant educational point in which I have to tell people, like, hey, look, I get it. You want to see the number go down, but you don't want to see the number go down by any means necessary, right? You don't want to lose too much muscle. And that's where I was like, okay, you know what? I need to get to a point where, I need to put it on a podcast. I need to talk about it on a pod, and I need to expand upon all of these things. And it was like how, lean muscle tissue is the number one thing for your health and long term. And it's the number one indicator of how much lean muscle tissue you have is the number one indicator of your lifespan and your health and your performance and all that fun stuff. And then I thought about that even more, and it's just like, well, not quite so there either, right? So that took me on a whole different journey of sorts. So I started digging into more of what actually determines your health, performance, and longevity, because that's what I'm focused on here. For this episode, we want to focus on health, performance, and longevity. And now that I guess that makes that makes sense a little bit, right? Like how I ended up talking about lean muscle tissue, but then going into this whole realm over here. And part of what sparked it as well is a conversation I had with my performance doctor. And that's kind of a funny term, performance doctor. Yeah, I wonder if he'll like that. But I got to get him on a pod too, by the way. But anyway, he was telling me that like he's all about mitochondrial efficiency, right? Like, he's about the energy of the cells and performing well with that, right? And I'm just like, cool. Because then he was like, and he made a comment and he said that, well, strength is the real test of longevity. And I'm like, huh. And it makes sense. It makes sense. So that's why you see a lot of studies talking about grip strength, and I thought there's one other study that talked about something with leg strength. I forgot what it was, and you can fact check me on that one. I might be completely off base, but I know there were a bunch of studies talking about grip strength and how it relates to living a long and healthy life, right? So that got me thinking, because they're just like, well, lean muscle tissue still does play a role. And I'm thinking that, and I'm not necessarily disagreeing with the statement he made at all either. So that sends me on a whole nother path, because it's like, while I don't disagree with him, I also think it's missing something, because lean muscle is important. But then it's just like, while lean muscle is important and mitochondrial efficiency is important, strength is also really important. So it's just like, wait a minute, okay. And that's where this episode comes from. So this episode, I'm going to break down exactly the three main metrics that you want to track, that you want to concern yourself with, to lead a life, fulfilling life, mind you, but of health, performance, and longevity, a long, healthy life. All right. And that's going to take a lot of explanation here, right? So we're going to start, though, with lean muscle tissue. And I'm going to start with lean muscle tissue primarily because, let me set the landscape a little bit differently here, right? Like, lean muscle tissue is important, but it's not everything, okay? Mitochondrial efficiency is important, but it's not everything, right? That's the energy, though, right? But then there's strength, right? And what is strength exactly? I'll propose that it's just neural activation. And that's important as well. So all three of those items, lean muscle tissue, the actual structure, the neural activation, and mitochondrial efficiency, those three and how they blend, how the synergy between them, that's what leads to health performance and longevity. Okay? So again, now lean muscle tissue by itself is great. I love it, right? And again, this is what the episode was going to be about. It's just like, oh, why is it lean muscle tissue? Why is lean muscle tissue important? But now this is a small segment of the total picture here. The role of lean muscle tissue is so lean muscle tissue is important, okay? And there are two categories of benefits when it comes to your lean muscle tissue, right? The first category is the benefits of lean muscle tissue in and of itself, right? So just having muscle, here are the benefits, right? And then the second category is the benefits that you get from the process of gaining lean muscle tissue, okay? So starting with the benefits of just the lean muscle tissue by itself, you get a metabolic boost, right? Because your muscles basically are your metabolism. Well, it's not the entirety of your metabolism, but I think you get the point. The more lean muscle tissue you have, the more calories you're burning just at rest, right? So, that basal metabolic rate, right? That also includes organs and stuff like that too. But anyway, all that aside, the more muscle you have, the more energy it burns, right? Because remember, your muscles are the thing that burns the energy that comes from fat, right? So just thinking about it in terms of like a weight management program or something like that, like that's why it's more beneficial to aim on the side of gaining lean muscle tissue so that you make that lean muscle tissue work and burn off the fat, right? Lean muscle tissue also helps with glucose regulation, right? Because your muscles are the main site of glucose uptake, right? So that promotes insulin sensitivity and proper sugar regulation, right? So that's, again, in and of itself, that's another important thing for lean muscle tissue, right? You also have boosted immune function from just from lean muscle tissue, because contracting activity within the muscles actually releases myokines. And those are so if you remember, go back to the episode that where I talked about inflammation, and I gave kind of like a brief, maybe it wasn't that brief, maybe it was like 45 minutes or so, pretty long for a video, but I gave you a breakdown of the causes of inflammation and the biological processes of inflammation. The myokines are the ones that go out and basically signal for inflammation. Or in other words, they regulate the inflammatory response. Another benefit of having a decent amount of lean muscle tissue, and this one kind of stinks a little bit, but basically lean muscle tissue acts as a reserve for energy during sickness, especially during severe sickness. So what happens is, whenever you get sick, your body uses up more energy and it uses up faster, right? Because the process of converting fat into energy is a little bit longer, your body isn't going to go to fat to burn that off when you're sick. it'll burn up all the glycogen first, right? And then it'll go kind of at the same time, start to break down your muscle proteins into the amino acids, into the aminos, but it'll break that down into the amino acids in order to use that for energy as well. And that's before you even really get to the fat. I don't like it. I don't know why, but that's a thing to say. Like, think about it, right? So it's kind of a survival mechanism a little bit there. But think about somebody who doesn't have that much lean muscle tissue when they get sick. It usually hits them a little bit harder because they don't have as much lean muscle tissue to break down, to convert into energy, to fight off with that virus or bacteria. And yeah, I don't like this one too much, but that's the way we work, right? So during times of sickness, it's faster to break down protein than it is to break down fat. So our bodies being as lazy as they are, we'll break down the protein and we'll break down the muscle catabolism, and we'll break it down so that we can convert it into energy to be able to use to fight off infection or virus or bacteria, whatever, right? Another benefit, and this is kind of like I guess this is on the bottom of the list a little bit there, but it's kind of towards the top of mine, whatever. But you get a confidence boost with lean muscle tissue, right? Now, this isn't a biological thing. This is more of a mental thing, right? You add a little bit of tissue, you get a little bit of not even cuts or anything like that. You fill out more, right? Different things like that. It tends to lead to a confidence boost. It tends to lead to a self-esteem boost, right? And yeah, so I think I'll leave it at that, right? Because I can go on for that for quite a long time. But at the end of the day, having a little bit more lean muscle tissue contributes, and it's not the entirety of it, but it contributes to having a higher self-confidence, right? And having a better image of oneself. Now, the process of building lean muscle tissue, that lends itself to some other benefits that are different. And here's the first one basically is, and this is probably the most important one, neuromuscular adaptations. And all that's saying is basically it's your brain's ability. So the process of building lean muscle tissue improves your brain's ability to recruit muscle fibers, which in turn improves your balance, your strength, and your coordination. That's super important right there in and of itself. And then the next benefit of the process of building lean muscle tissue, it comes down to your hormones and your mood. So it improves your mood. It helps balance. It can help balance your hormones, but you also release endorphins, which make you feel good, but also makes you relax, and also relieves stress, right? So the process of building lean muscle tissue can help out with all of that. And then lastly, the process of building up lean muscle tissue allows you, and it helps you in this process of building resilience, right? Because that process alone requires discipline, and it requires a routine. It requires strategic discomfort on one end. It requires endurance on the other end. All of that stuff allows you to build yourself into a resilient being, right? So the process of building lean muscle tissue helps you build resilience. So lean muscle tissue in and of itself is important, and the process of building lean muscle tissue is important. But lean muscle tissue, lean muscle mass in and of itself, in the process thereof, is not everything. Okay? If you're looking for better health, performance, and longevity outcomes, you have to concern yourself with more than just volume of muscle mass. Volume of muscle mass isn't enough to get to that better, that long, healthy, well-performing life, right? So you need more, right? And so instead of solely focusing on the volume of muscle mass, focus or shift your focus to the functional capacity of said lean muscle tissue. Now, in other words, that's strength. So this is where we get into the nervous system, because the strength is basically this. The strength in and of itself is the ability of your brain to coordinate and fire off the right muscle fibers at the right time in relation to the muscle's total functional capacity, right? So you're not going to contract the muscle or release a muscle or whatever past its functional capacity. That's where you rip the muscle. That's where you get injured, right? And so while you can concern yourself initially with having a decent amount of muscle mass, the thing is you want an adequate amount of muscle mass, right? So because otherwise what I would say here, and I'm not saying this, it was like, well, technically all bodybuilders are the healthiest people because they have the most lean muscle tissue. And we already know that's virtually the exact opposite, right? So it's not the volume of lean muscle tissue, but again, the functional capacity or the strength, okay? So this is also why recent studies have shown that, grip strength has become a really good predictor of longevity, right? Because it's again, it's an indication of how well your brain can fire these muscle fibers off in a coordinated way. So enhanced neuromuscular function supports balance, quick response, and injury prevention. Okay, so all of this stuff comes into play, but it really comes down to neural activation or strength. I link those two together, right? So when I say strength, I mean neural activation. And when I say neural activation, I mean strength, because that's essentially what it is. So let's get to the next part here, right? So that or the last part which is mitochondrial efficiency. I mean, all these terms they're all a mouthful basically, but mitochondrial efficiency it's the mitochondria is the powerhouse of the cell, right? That's your energy, right? So it comes down to energy in this instance here, right? And what mitochondrial efficiency does is it benefits both your muscles and your neural activation, right? So mitochondria produces ATP. Muscles need ATP. Right? And muscle contractions, that's the energy that's used for muscle contractions, right? But it's also the ATP energy that's used in neural signaling, okay? Furthermore, when we get to the nervous system, like the mitochondria efficiency produces a sustained, consistent energy for all of your neural pathways. So, efficient mitochondrial processes, if you want to say it that way, or mitochondrial, I don't even think of processes. Efficient mitochondrial processes basically lends itself to having better nervous system activation, okay? But keep in mind, it's not the only important piece when it comes to neural activation, because there's other parts to it, right? You have to consider ion channel regulation, synaptic transmission, and neural connectivity. And the way I look at it is this: those are basically the structures in which the energy is applied to. So if you have some messed up parts of the structure, then it's not going to be as efficient of a process. But both are absolutely needed, right? To achieve robust strength, healthy and efficient mitochondria, and finely tuned neural circuits is key. So, because remember, energy alone by itself is quite meaningless, right? And it's actually an abstract idea here, right? But if you apply it to some structure, that's when we actually get the meaning here. The structure here is your neural pathway, right? Or your neural pathways. So what are some strategies to improve mitochondrial function and in efficiency in that process, right? And in turn, also improve neural function slash lean muscle tissue activation, right? Well, first and foremost is exercise, all kinds. You take your pick, right? Steady state cardio promotes mitochondrial biogenesis, which is just enhancing overall production of mitochondria, which is great, right? You need that. HIIT challenges all your energy systems and leads to better mitochondrial adaptations and neural recruitment. So think sprinting, which I did an episode on before as well. So it's like things like that, sprinting, high intense, shorter amount of time, but it leads to better mitochondrial adaptations. And then there's resistance training, right? So you're covering all your bases. You can do all of them, and they all have benefits to mitochondrial efficiency and neural activity and activation, right? So resistance training drives neuromuscular efficiency and refines motor unit synchronization, right? Man, there's a lot of different like mouthful words going on right now. So I hope y'all still hanging with me and following me on this one, right? And then let's skip to the nutrition. So, I mean, that one's pretty simple. A well-balanced diet that's, has the complex carbs, proteins, and fats. It allows for greater cellular function, first of all. But if you also throw in some antioxidant-rich foods like berries and leafy greens, you basically amplify those effects, and you protect the cells, and thereby protecting the mitochondria from damage and oxidative stress. Okay. Next thing you could do, or the next area that you could change, really comes down to changing, your lifestyle and recovery. Right. Get good sleep, but get like deep sleep. Like the amount of deep sleep you can get is really important for mitochondrial repair and what's the phrase? Neural regeneration. Thinking in general, like the things that you do, manage your stress. That's kind of like a no-brainer, like duh, right? Manage stress. Stress is bad. Well, not all stress is bad. So let me maybe go into that a little bit more. Typically, the stress that we encounter is kind of like, I look at it the same way as inflammation, right? Not all inflammation is bad, just like not all stress is bad. It's when you have too much. So it's actually not necessarily the quality, it's more of a quantity. If you have too much, you go over your certain limit, that's when you have problems. Inflammation and stress are kind of like the same thing in my eyes when it comes to that. So if you have too much stress, that's a damaging effect here. But a little bit of stress allows your body to adapt and grow and proceed, right? So a little bit of stress is necessary. Too much stress is detrimental, okay? You also should do cognitive and skill-based activities. So do something fun, go play, right? Like there's another episode in here right now, right? So, but learn new things, pick up new skills. I talk about this a lot, right? The importance of picking up a new skill, learning new things. It keeps your brain good. It keeps your brain healthy, but it also aids in this process called neuroplasticity, okay? And that's just basically your brain adjusting, you building new pathways, you building new neural pathways to do whatever that skill is that you're learning, or to learn something new and to proceed on and grow and be better, right? That's important in mitochondrial efficiency. And it's important. That's a way to improve mitochondrial efficiency. And what that also does is it further reinforces the current neural pathways you already have, right? And then look into like the other health stuff, right? Like there's another episode where we're talking about sauna, cold plunges, hyperbaric oxygen chamber, red light therapy, those other health things that are not absolutely necessary, but they can absolutely help in boosting mitochondrial function and efficiency. Go with those. And I'll add one more thing under the under the other health stuff, and that's peptides. There are a whole bunch of Ozempics, the Wegovy's, and all that fun stuff. Those are peptides, and I'm not necessarily talking about those peptides. There's plenty more that have been out for way longer that are pretty decent in building up that or benefiting you in a way that allows you to build up mitochondrial efficiency. Okay, it helps out your cells. It helps out the communication between your cells. It helps out the cell energy. It helps protect the cells. So there are a lot of various peptides, and I mean, look, they're coming out more and more. And again, I'm not saying I'm taking any particular side, because there's benefits and there's drawbacks to each thing there. But there are definitely some peptides, and I'm thinking of them in mind now. Like, there are some peptides out there. I just don't want to. I'm not promoting them per se, but there's peptides out there that can help you with cellular regeneration and neural regeneration. Like, it's really interesting. But I'll label that under, or I'll stick that under, like, other health stuff. Okay. So what's the connection here? Now we get to, like, the main point here. How does lean muscle tissue, strength, or neural activation, and mitochondrial efficiency, how do those three lead to health, performance, and longevity, right? And it's not, the thing about it is, it's not just one thing that leads to that. Lean muscle by itself doesn't lead to better health outcomes. Mitochondrial efficiency doesn't necessarily lead to longevity. And strength or neural activation doesn't necessarily lead to better performance. And that's so it's just like, well, actually it does. No, so there are a number of ways in which any one of those things by themselves doesn't lead to the outcomes that you're looking for, or the outcomes that you would ideally want, right? So it's actually the synergy between those three that leads you to better health, performance, and longevity. Okay? So think of it this way. Lean muscle is the foundation. This is the raw material for strength and proper function. But again, more muscle mass alone isn't sufficient. Okay? Neural activation or strength is kind of the leader. It's the leader or the conductor of sorts, right? Neural activation ensures that each fiber of lean mass works together in a coordinated way. Okay? And then you have mitochondrial efficiency. It's the power or the spark or the fuel, right? It fuels both muscles and neural activation. It fuels muscle contraction and neural firing. This efficiency makes sure that both systems are at peak. Now, this just doesn't make you stronger or faster, but it also reduces injury risk, enhances recovery, and allows you to maintain functional independence. Now, muscle, neural efficiency, mitochondrial health, those three are the predictors of a long and healthy life. So in closing, while I wanted to do an episode on just lean muscle tissue, because it's fun, and I started off doing the episode as a lean muscle tissue episode, neural activation is important. Mitochondrial efficiency is important, right? Those two are important, but even more important than any one individual item is how each of them play with each other. The synergy between your lean muscle tissue, your neural activation, and your mitochondrial efficiency, that is what's important, okay? And the way to go, the way you improve, the way you lead to better health, performance, and longevity outcomes is by addressing all three. Address all three. Because when you combine the energy power from your mitochondrial efficiency with the precision of your neural system to the structure of your lean muscle, then and only then will you really reach peak health, peak performance, peak longevity, or maybe just longevity in general, right? It's the formula for long-term health and vitality. Okay? So I'm not going to stay in your hair too much longer here. That's it. Remember, build some lean muscle tissue. Improve your strength, right? And improve your mitochondrial efficiency. Worry about doing those three. You'll get to those outcomes of health, performance, and longevity. Well, all right, friends, listen, it was a blast. And we're back for being back with this solo episode. I'm not going to stay too much longer here, so we're going to close it on out. I've referenced a lot of episodes during this one talk, what have you. So by all means, go back to those, listen to those, and it'll give you a total picture here of what I'm talking about. But that I want to make a little bit of a charge here, right? I want to make a charge to focus on lean muscle tissue, but just not lean muscle tissue, but focus on the strength, but not just the strength, but also focus on the mitochondrial efficiency or that energy production, right? We want to focus on all that. That's what's really going to lead you to better health outcomes, and better performance outcomes, and longevity in general, right? Okay, so in the meantime, I'm Coach Evan. This is Stay Cheese and Lift Studio, and you just got finished listening to the Scowl Method podcast. Your one-stop shop for not only physical fitness, but mental fitness and emotional fitness and spiritual fitness. I'll see you all in the next episode. Y'all take care. Be safe.